So there's been some talk recently about Draymond Green, that perhaps his days with the Warriors are a little numbered, given the episode with Kevin Durant not too long ago, on top of the way that his shooting has looked really bad lately, and is perhaps the worst that it has ever been for him. On top of the fact that the Warriors defensively have been slipping the past couple of seasons, and is it possible that Draymond is just not as good as he once was? So, let's look at all this stuff. Now, typically I don't use defensive rating for individual players unless it's centers, or if it's guys like Draymond who spend a decent amount of time at center, or they're like the defensive backbone of a team, which he is, so I will use it in this case. Draymond's personal defensive rating would suggest that he is totally fine, because basically when he plays, the Warriors are the best defensive team in the league, and when he does not play, they drop off pretty considerably to 111 defensive rating, which would put them actually towards the bottom of the league. And that's pretty drastic, and you know, if some of this is of course because of who else he plays with and all that stuff. I don't think the eye test totally backs that up, though. I think when you watch the Warriors, Draymond is definitely a little slower than he once was. The plays he would make where he would just come from out of nowhere to block a shot at the rim, or to cut off a ball handler, or cut off like a cutter and then get back to his guy. It does seem like he is perhaps a little bit worse at that. And maybe he'll get blown by a couple more times a game by a perimeter player that he switches onto. With all of this being said, he's still a damn good defender, and on his best day, and hell, even on his 85% days, there are still very few players in the league who make the defensive impact that Draymond does. So I don't think we should be acting like he has fallen off on defense. I mean, I think if you replaced him with, let's say if you replaced him with Al-Farouq Aminu, I think this team would take a nosedive on defense, so I think we should remember that. What's interesting is that the death lineup has been bad this year. It's like minus 13 in 40 minutes. The reason I'm not freaking out about that is because the way that defenses deal with that lineup now versus how they dealt with it in the playoffs are basically the same thing. Leave Draymond open, leave Iguodala open. And that lineup was still really good in the postseason, and it was still their go-to when they needed it against the Rockets and all that. So I do think while, for whatever reason, it hasn't been as good this year, maybe because, one, they just haven't used it as much, so perhaps it's not as comfortable, on top of Clay's three-pointer, just for whatever reason, being not good so far, with Iguodala not really giving a crap until like Game 6 of the Western Conference Finals at this point, to where that lineup has not been the best. I'm not freaking out about it. Now, is there room for freaking out about Draymond's offense? Yeah, I could picture it. I mean, sure, his jump shot has looked really bad this year, and you can tell that he is all the way in his own head. I feel like the past couple of years, even when he's been a below average three-point shooter, he was still decently confident in himself, even if he really shouldn't have been. Whereas now, he's hesitating a little bit more. He's shooting like one less three a game. He's airballed some wide open ones. He's clanged some off like the backboard, or like barely hitting the rim. And the thing is, like, now everybody knows this, so there may be that added pressure to it as well. When he's wide open, the crowd is going to make a little bit more noise than they used to and all that stuff. And is it possible that this could be the Warriors' downfall in the playoffs? I mean, if you make me pick, no. I still think these guys are going to win the finals, and I wouldn't be shocked if they kind of ran through the playoffs. But yeah, could this be the difference between them beating a team like the Nuggets or the Thunder in 6 or maybe even 7 games, as opposed to sweeping them or winning in 5? Yeah, I could picture it, especially because Iguodala's jumper comes and goes so much. So as a result, yes, this should be something the Warriors should be a bit concerned about. The other thing that is a little frightening with Draymond that I think has become a little underrated with all of his jump shot struggles, he has become a turnover machine. His turnover percentage is actually higher than his assist percentage. And a lot of it is still the things that he's always been doing, which is like defense leaves him open. He drives inside, goes for the alley-oop on the big, or he'll get the rebound and then bring it up floor himself. I think the difference is, one, again, he is a little slower, and I think that is translating to offense where he's just not getting to the spot as quickly, or he is just not beating the defender as much. But I think defenses are also just a little better at defending what the Warriors do. Now, there are still things that are impossible to stop, which are Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, and Klay Thompson when he gets it figured out. But Draymond is way more human on offense than those three are, so if he's a little slower and the rotation towards him is a little better and all that stuff, yeah, it can be just enough to where he cannot be that same playmaker. So, is there a chance that defenses are just going to dare Draymond to do everything in the postseason? I could certainly picture it. That's probably what I would do. Now, one thing with the Warriors is that they're so smart that you can't do anything against them for too long because let's say you're leaving Draymond wide open on certain off-ball movements so you can load up on Curry moving off the ball. Well, then Draymond's going to cut to the basket or something. Like, you're going to need a good system, a good coach, and smart players to deal with these guys. But I guess they are perhaps like 3% more beatable than they were even last season when Draymond was already kind of beginning his offensive decline, but it wasn't to where it is now. Also, another thing that I think is interesting with Draymond's offense is he's committing a lot of offensive fouls, which I believe is part of his turnover percentage. He's already got 11 offensive fouls this year. Last year he had 15, and that was in 70 games. So maybe that's defenders beating him to the spot more often for charges and things like that. Maybe he's trying to overcompensate a little too much by being extra physical because he can't get by guys as often. What could be really interesting in a playoff series is with all the good defensive power forwards that are in the West, between Jeremy Grant, Paul Millsap, Brandon Ingram, who I think can be an awesome defender, and I wouldn't be surprised if he went up a few levels as the year went along. Aminu, PJ Tucker, Jaren Jackson. If all of these guys are going to be able to free roam just a little bit more because they're ignoring Draymond for stretches of the game, hey, maybe the Warriors will have a little bit tougher of a time. Now, of course, I think the death lineup is going to turn around. I think Klay is going to start making his threes, and that's going to make Draymond's offense look a lot better. And at the end of the day, I still believe the Warriors are the best team in the NBA. And sure, is the Kevin Durant-Draymond thing a thing? Yes. But I think this team is still so talented and so smart to where they're going to overcome any passive aggressiveness between those two. Now, as far as could that result in Draymond not being on the team, like, after this year is over, if they have to make a decision between the two of them, yeah, it's possible. We'll see what happens. I don't want to put too much energy into that because we still have a whole season to go before that. And there is also a chance that if Draymond keeps on declining like this, with his contract being up after next season, hey, maybe the Warriors would not be as beat up on having to trade him if Kevin Durant really made it me versus him to the front office. So, yeah. I guess I can spend 1 minute talking about the Warriors more as a whole. Is there anything that they need? Any additions they have to make? I mean, getting Jerebko to be that one other guy to shoot some outside jumpers and not be afraid of it, the way that Caspi and Nick Young were, is pretty cool. Livingston is not playing that much. I expect once the postseason rolls around, he'll get some more minutes. If Iguodala's jump shot could look even halfway respectable by the time the postseason begins, that would be huge, but I'm not holding out for that one too much. And of course, we must remember that Demarcus Cousins is going to happen at some point for these guys. So, I mean, you look at a rotation of Steph, Clay, KD, Draymond. I don't know who starts at the 5. I have to assume it would still be Damian Jones when Boogie initially comes back. But basically a rotation of Jones, Looney, and DeMarcus. And then between Livingston, Iguodala, and Jerebko, yeah, that team's looking pretty damn good, and I would expect them to win this whole thing. And then between McKinney and Quinn Cook doing their occasional 10-minute-a-game three-pointers, yeah, I think they'll be fine. And that was me stretching the video to 10 minutes. So that'll be it. Draymond is Draymond, and I'm out.